Aloha, podcast family. Welcome back to the Embodied Healing Self. I have with me today a very special guest, Angie Schaffer. And Angie is an intuitive mothering coach. She's a Reiki healer, an animal healer, and the creator of the Awoken Mother program. So, just by that invitation, you're probably already guessing that we're going to be talking about mothering and parenting today, which is one of both of our favorite topics to talk about, actually. And we're happy to share this with you today. So thank you so much, Angie, for being here today.
Oh, no, thank you. I was super excited when I saw your text asking me if we wanted to connect and record together. And I am excited for our time here today.
Awesome. I think I forgot to mention that you're also the host of the Intuitive Mother podcast. So for those of you mothers specifically relating to mother-daughter conversations, I did invite you to check out that podcast. I was actually a guest on the show as well. So go ahead and check
Yes,
that out.
yes. Thank you. We'll make sure to get you the episode that you were in and that you can always let people know. But that was a fun conversation itself.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So just before we got on today, we were talking about how mothering and parenting is a portal for awakening. And I think it's a really important conversation always to have, but I feel that the time that we're living in right now is becoming even more critical because there are so many things happening in the world right now that feel a little bit confusing for some children. And we're really
Mm,
being invited to kind of reveal our own masks and really discover who we are and how we show up. And oftentimes, our kids are the ones that are bringing us the questions. They're the ones bringing us awareness to either what needs to be addressed in the world or in our homes, or B, what's happening as a reflection through
mhm,
parenting in our own
mhm,
self work. And you
mhm,
and I both have stories of, how we really chose to lean in and let our children be the teachers and became more conscious and aware of the choices that we were making in our lives as we began to listen to. We're both the mother of two daughters, to our daughters.
mhm.
And there's a lot of things that we've talked about over the past couple of years as you've been on this journey, things like parenting from gifts and not from wounds, and really realizing that our children are here to teach us. So I just want to start out by just asking you, what what was that moment for you that you really knew you were here to help coach other mothers and parents into co-creating healthy relationships with their children?
Oh, I love this one. And I thought of this exact thought earlier today. I have always known, and you have these women that will say, like, well, when I was a little girl, I know I wanted to be a nurse or a doctor or a teacher. And people would say this to me, and I would say, well, I wanted to be a mother. Like, I have no recollection of anything else I wanted to be, except for like an Air Force pilot, which I always laugh that you and I connected because then you and I had similar like little dreams as little girls, but it was always a mother. And when I think about that now, I used to think that seemed so small. Like, oh, I just wanted to be a mother. Like, really? How am I going to tell people this? It's like, that sounds so tiny. And then I really lived into teenage years and sinking into my own healing and our healing together, my daughters and I. And I realized, oh my goodness, I always wanted to be a mother because I always knew that mother would be the portal to my awakening, that motherhood would lead me to healing. And that I was then going to walk through it to one day share it, because it is huge when we think when they're placed in our arms as infants that is maybe the hardest time period. I think that's what I thought, like, oh, they're babies and this will be so hard. And we have all of this lifetime to spend with them. And then they grow up and they grow up quickly. And I just remember really feeling into those teenage years that like, this is what I came here to do. I came here to heal motherhood for myself, to guide other women to do it for themselves, and then in turn, do it because our children will one day become mothers if they so choose, and to do it for our grandchildren. And I have always held my grandmothers in very dear spots of my heart. And I look at this work as I am doing it not just for myself and my daughters, but for my granddaughters and going forward. So the moment was probably just a few years ago, and it has evolved. There have been very specific moments that I remember thinking like, oh my goodness, this is what I'm here to heal. This is why this is coming up with my daughter. And, I often say to my oldest that, she sort of was my guinea pig in many, many ways. And I didn't know what I was getting into as a mom. I thought it would be a piece of cake. And here I was making quote unquote mistakes in motherhood. And I was finding them thrown back at me just because she would hold up that mirror and I would see what I didn't like. And, there were many of those moments. Some in particular were when she was learning how to drive. And, it was all coming back that I needed to control everything. But all the moments of teenage years. So my daughters are almost 15 and 17 and a half. So I would say for the past 3 years was really when I leaned in and realized this was not just something to walk through and mother while unconsciously aware of what they were bringing to me, but to truly lean in and not only set a good example and be a mom to them, but to heal together.
Yeah. And I just want to highlight one of the things that I heard repetitively as you were sharing is that there were many moments throughout parenting where you felt like this is what I'm here to do. You had those breakthrough aha moments. And everything that we're going to talk about today, just for the listeners, is really about the mother's experience. It's not really about what happened with our daughters. Their journey is theirs to share, but more or less what we learned about ourselves in that process. And so I'm curious, as you shared, there were moments that really just, you had that moment of like, this is what I'm here to do. Looking back, would you say was the biggest breakthrough or revelation that you had within yourself that you knew needed to be healed just based on your experience as a mother? What would you say the biggest sort of breakthrough or takeaway was?
Gosh, I feel to pull all of the separate experiences into one breakthrough was that these wounds that I had carried with me into my life and my motherhood, and that I was mothering at a time period from wounds, not from my gifts. And that was a breakthrough moment of recognizing the wounds that I was carrying with me, whether they were, I'm not enough, or I don't trust myself, or I don't love myself, or just anything that I feel like we all carry around with us in some capacity. But when your daughter is saying, I hate myself, it's coming right back at you, and you're recognizing that I was actually mothering from the wound and that insecurity within myself. And she was seeing that and learning it. And that wound really started to become a forefront for me for healing. Anytime I felt that poke at something not feeling quite right, and it was bringing up things for me, it was that through multiple experiences, that would be when I would dive in deep and heal together.
Yeah, I want to take a minute first to just thank you for the courage and vulnerability to share that. And I just want to invite the listeners to we're just going to like take a deep breath together, because that was like a really big, kind of heavy little bomb that you just dropped. And I don't know if everybody was like ready to like hear that, because we don't want to hear it when we hear somebody say it. So I'm just going to like invite everybody to just take a deep breath. This is where transformation occurs. This is where change happens. This is where we get to choose. This is where you decide in this moment what your life is going to look like. This is where you either struggle to get out of bed every day, or you decide you're going to get out of bed and you're going to live the life that God has created for you, whatever your belief is around that. You understand that everybody has trials. Everybody's been smacked in the face. Everybody's had things that have hurt them. Everybody has lost loved ones. Some people maybe have had it harder than others. And maybe we've made mistakes as parents. Maybe we've made a lot of mistakes as parents. Maybe some of us make it look super easy. But all of that doesn't even matter, because what really matters is right now, everybody listening gets a choice. And what Angie's saying is, what she noticed and all the patterns that were happening, whatever the experience is, doesn't even really matter, right? Because I can't relate to your specific experience parenting your daughter specifically, and you won't relate to mine, whatever that is. However, how we felt in the experience can be very similar. And what you noticed from all of the experiences is that you had a choice to either parent from your own wounding, subconscious beliefs of limiting beliefs of not being worthy, not being good enough, not loving yourself, being scared to have courage to do something even, or lack of confidence, self-doubt, all the things that we are experiencing. Nobody really gets through life without experiencing some of those things. And then being aware of that, allowing yourself enough space and grace to actually notice what's happening through the words of our children, and then choosing to be like, okay, I recognize that this is an unhealthy belief or pattern. This is something possibly from my childhood, and I don't want to pass it on to my kids. And so in that moment, you had to ask yourself something. And I'm just curious, like, what were the questions that you asked yourself to really get yourself out of that? Because we could just choose to stay in victimhood. We could just be like, oh, parenting is so hard. And like, I don't want to be the one to, my parents hurt me. And why do I have to be the one to change all this? Like, we could stay there.
It's you know what I just said to my daughter, and my youngest is very open and always gives me free will to share some of our conversations on my own podcast and everything. But I just said to her the other day, do you realize why sometimes you see individuals really struggling for a long period of time? Because I believe in many ways it's easier to sit there in the depression. It's easier to sit there in the anxiety attack. And I know, because I did it for 10 years. I sat in the anxiety, and I had attacks where I would call family members saying, I think I'm dying, like call 911 for me. I said, it's easier. It's hard work to get yourself out of the anxiety, out of the depression, out of the angst of this is never going to change, and start making choices that will push you further ahead to the life you want. And if you can't, envision that, you need someone to hold your hand walking through that and to be there with them. And the questions I had to ask myself was like, is this really the mom? Is this really the mom that I wanted to show up and be? Not in any way, shape, or form. So as I was, maybe laying in bed crying, thinking to myself, like, I don't like myself. I don't like how I'm reacting versus responding to my daughters. I now know that those reactions were trauma responses within myself, but I don't like that. I am in no way, shape, or form the mother of my dreams that I set out to be. So what am I going to do? Am I going to perpetuate this and ultimately create more distance between my daughters and I? Or am I going to look in the mirror and figure out how I am going to heal whatever is coming up between us? So the question was, is this who I want to show up as a mom? Like, is this, if I were to die tomorrow in a car accident, is that really the mom that I wanted them to remember? The one that didn't, that just reacted all the time and continued patterns, which at that point they probably wouldn't have realized. No. So I ended up going really deep in my own healing. But I think a key point was that I was really honest and open with them. And I did not hide what I was going through. They're, almost 3 years apart. So sometimes I shared more with my oldest than my youngest. But my youngest is almost 15, and we are now in the depths of me again sharing how deep and dark I felt at times, trying to navigate out of wounds that had come from nowhere because I didn't realize I was carrying wounds, and how all of what they navigated brought those wounds to light and brought to light what I needed to heal within myself.
So how a question's coming up for me, because I know, I'm sure many of the listeners, especially if they're around the age that we're in our 40s, but we were raised very differently. We were probably raised with parents or maybe even mothers who did not disclose a lot of information, who did not share a lot. They probably kind of, it was just a different time. It was a different generation. And I know that I certainly had very different conversations with my daughter than was ever available for me to have with my mom. And how do you discern? And by discerning, I mean, like, just there is also, as a mother, a responsibility to maintain sacred container, and there's a responsibility to maintain healthy boundaries. Like, there's kind of an age where they start to shift into, a little bit more of like, not like a friendship, but you have different conversations, but you're still the mom, right? So how do you navigate, specifically in these teenage years, healthy discernment in allowing them to have their own experience and sharing just enough to kind of give them permission to be who they are and not try and hide it, but also to let them have their own experience?
Sure. I mean, what's coming up for me is that I feel like I've approached this question and this part of parenthood with the availability to always be there, but to know that one might, like, there's no clear-cut age. So my one daughter's 17 and a half, and one is almost 15. I would say the conversation started getting deeper around 16 for my oldest. But I would also say that that's when she started to hold the mirror up to me even more so than maybe what she had at 14 or 15. It's when the conversations got deeper because she was already dating somebody for a year. And so we had to go deeper. And so maybe it's more life experience and where they are so
letting them lead the conversation with the questions,
guide that. Because my youngest, I feel like I've maybe gone deeper on some subjects with her because she has struggled with different thing. And honestly, actually, a lot of what they've experienced is the same wound, but showing up in different ways in their personal life. But letting their experience and them guide me into when I'm going to go deep. And there is a time and place, there's some things that just are not to be shared. And there are times where the conversation just sort of goes there. And I've had to come out and say to my husband, just so you know, that went real deep real fast. And I'm not sure if you were okay with that, but this is what I said. And just, I can't necessarily always stop it. And I feel like in that moment, that's what was supposed to come out. And that I want to always show up true and honest, and also with the ability to say, hey, I did, this is something I've struggled with, or this is an area of life that I made this choice. And maybe looking back, that wasn't, the best choice, but it was a mistake or a life lesson, I would say, that I've learned from. And I'm going to be honest with you because I want you to know you can always come to me with those honest questions about that same, area of life. But yeah, letting them guide it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I'm thinking about the people who are listening right now, and as a coach, health and life, and I do tend to attract conversations around parenting as well, because usually when I'm in a social setting, it's with my family. And I know that there are a lot of moms out there who are just sitting with, the challenges and the struggles of parenting. And one of the things that can come up is that we can become very hard on ourselves, and we are invited to practice self-compassion and forgiveness. And that when we do that, so I hear you saying that when you have conversations with your daughter, you are very open and honest with them, and this is one of the ways that we can do that. When we do that, we give them permission to be self-compassionate, which I think is something that, I'll just speak mostly to women because I work with women and this is what I noticed, but it's something that we're definitely working towards. We've been trying to prove ourselves for so long.
Oh yeah.
And but also that forgiveness piece. So how do you practice self-compassion and forgiveness when it comes to something that you so deeply care about? Like, you care so much about how you show up as a mother, you care so much about your girls, and yet we still make mistakes. So how do you practice self-compassion and self-forgiveness in the process?
Wow. This has been my greatest lesson in the past, since last December, I would say. So within the past year, I have had to learn to embody self-compassion and forgiveness. And it wasn't easy because it wasn't something that I ever really saw modeled for me. And when it comes to motherhood, for me, I hold myself to very high standards just because I thought I was going to be the mother of my dreams. And so here I am. I could tell a very quick story. And my daughter, my oldest, knows I share this all the time. She was seeing a therapist due to anxiety and stuff that was coming up between the pandemic and also lingering from our relationship and some heated conversations her and I had. And she's seeing her therapist, and I go in to pay. And she's like, oh, and the therapist wants to make an appointment with you. And I was like, with me? Okay. And so the therapist starts like, well, when are you free? And I said, oh, well, but my husband, if he's going to come, it would be like lunchtime. And she looks up and she says, it's not for your husband, it's for you. I said, oh, all right, just me. So, okay, anytime. Got it down. We got in the car. I looked over, oh no, we start driving. My daughter says to me, what's wrong? Because, she can read me like a book. And we read each other very well, all three of us, my two daughters and I. And we're all empathic and we're all intuitive. And it's quite an interesting life here for my husband.
That's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole different conversation. But man, we can go real deep.
Yeah.
He was like, what's wrong? And I was like, well, I'm just not really understanding why dad doesn't have to be there if this is for your well-being. And she looks at me. Now I'm driving. She looks at me and she says, because you're the problem. And I was like, whew, okay. No, let's not hit anybody on the side of the street or slam into another car now. Let's just get home. So we get home. This is the days after Christmas. I get home and I walk in. She goes upstairs. She can tell, like, I'm either going, this was a very defining moment because she didn't know if I was going to go crazy and start reacting again, or if I had actually shifted and if I was going to walk through this quietly. So we come in, I did not react. She goes upstairs, whatever. I have like this crying fit with my husband, who tries to reassure me, we've all done things that will leave these lasting impressions on our daughters and la, la, la. And I was like, nope, not good enough. And I had to sit for months with the self-compassion and the forgiveness. And I had to journal, and I had to have conversations with her. How I think, because like deep down, I needed to really get clear to myself, like that it was never intentional. For me to hurt her would have never been intentional. And for me to hear you're the problem, it all actually like stirred up a lot of my own childhood stuff and what I was bringing forward. So I would say I have conversations to open that door. And I also give myself a lot of grace that we do as we do until we know better, and then we shift and we do better. And that I was going to, at this point, really change and really step out and do better. And that in time, by doing better and putting one foot in front of the other every day and showing up in loving response versus freak out reaction, she was going to learn to trust me again. And that it was going to, in itself, I would forgive myself in time. And also to recognize, this was huge, and this was more recent, to recognize that if I forgive my mother for things that I know she would have never done to hurt me, but did, and that I have carried with me for 42 years, there is no, like, of course my daughter would forgive me, and it might take time, but she deserves that time as well, because it was hurtful to her. But that as long as we kept open communication and I kept showing up in response, and I kept learning how to love myself through something I didn't like about myself. I guess that was,
I love
that was
that. I
that.
love that you brought it full circle back to your mom. And I, of course, in that some of the work that I do, I invite people to heal their relationship with the feminine. And that always has to do with mom, because that is the first person who shows us what mother energy is. And one of the things that I invite women to do is to write a letter where we just blame her for everything. And then after that, we thank her for everything that she did. She did her best. Because as you know, as a mother, we're trying to do our best. And then after that, we apologize for the things that we did. This is us as children to our mothers. And then we forgive them for the things that they did. And then lastly, we just decide like what we're not available for anymore in our relationship with our mother. But then what's so interesting is what that's really saying is it's giving you more clarity on what you're not available for yourself, which means you will choose to show up differently as a mother, because if you're not available for something for your own mother, well, then you better not be showing up that way as a mother, right? So it's really, it's a process, and and this whole process, as you're speaking, you're really illustrating the picture that this is not a one-time thing. This is very multi-layered, very multi-dimensional. We're constantly peeling the layers like an onion.
Yeah.
And same thing with this letter. You could write this letter a million times. You could write all kinds of letters to your mother and burn them and have a ceremony, and you might, still feel unresolved, because I think the final piece to all of this is that when it doesn't even matter what relationship in life it is, parenting is just reflecting back to us what it is within us that is asking for to be healed. And parenting is just one of those avenues.
Yeah.
But when we do the inner work and we show up the best that we can for wherever we are, I think the final piece is allowing ourselves to then release attachment to any outcome or any expectation or anything that might come in the future, because anxiety always comes from the future. It's always a perceived thought of what might happen in the future. And if we can really give ourselves permission to do the inner work and trust and accept that where we are, you said, take that next small step. And if we can
Mhm.
just wake up that day and take that next small step, if we can recognize that we're being activated rather than triggered, and we can choose to respond rather than to react, then we've already won. Like, we won
Mhm.
that day. We won the quote battle for the day. And it's all about just that next small step. It's all about that
Mhm.
next conversation, that
Mhm.
next, you know, whatever comes up.
Mhm.
So what would you say to a parent who's listening right now? What would you say it is that there's probably something that they want, but then there's something that they need? What would you say that they really truly need to move forward if they're struggling with how they're showing up as a mother right now, or even
Mhm.
if they're struggling with just life in general, because parenting is just, again, one of those relationships that reflects to us our own inner healing that's needed. They may not
Mhm.
even realize it's parenting, because what we do is we project.
Mhm.
We easily project our emotions onto other people, our spouse, our children, people at work, and we blame everybody else for all of our problems.
Mhm. Absolutely.
It's one of the ways that we kind of get out of it easy. But what would
Mhm.
you say if you were to really just kind of center in and hone in on a parent who's listening right now, a mother who's struggling in some way? What would you say it is that they really probably need in this moment that they might not be aware of?
Grace comes through time and time again. And because it's grace that will give you the peace to be in the present moment. It's grace that will allow you to release the uh, anger and, you know, everything you're holding against yourself, because grace will then bring you, if you can release all of that, grace will bring you back to the present. And there is no time. I mean, it sounds so cliche, there's no time like the present, but there's really not. And our children are in our care for X amount of years. And grace just repetitively would bring me back to, like, I would just repeat to myself, Angie, just give yourself grace. Like, you are simply doing the best you can. And I don't, like, I kept thinking I needed more time. I needed more healing. I needed to know what to do next. I needed control. I need control, control, control. Like, I need somebody else to help me with this. I need this, I need that. And all I really needed was to give myself grace.
Mm.
And when I was giving it to them, myself, I was ultimately also giving it to my daughters.
Yeah.
And, seeing all of that come full circle. But the grace was just so big, because if we can be in the present moment and we can take a deep breath with them as we're activated or whatever, but we give ourselves grace, we just give them grace, and we give the whole present day becomes grace filled. And I have grace tattooed on my body, and I never really honed in on that word until the past couple of years in motherhood. And it's been tattooed there since my grandmother passed away 6 years ago. But
Mm.
I really think grace always will bring you back to love for yourself, and love for them, and love for this moment, and love for all that motherhood can be through the ups and downs and the crazy days. And I think about little moms with little kids, and the grace that, even they need, but then how we don't know it's going to evolve into so much bigger of, like, life issues that we're going to
Mhm.
be dealing with, and that each and every day we live grace. And I was just telling my youngest this just recently, who's still struggling after 6 years of struggling with, like, making friends and trusting girls and everything. And I said, if you can give yourself grace at the end of every day, that you're showing up the best that you can, then we can start again tomorrow.
That's beautiful. I love that. And that's one of my favorite words. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think we're gonna complete it on there, because I think that there is no other place to go from there. I think if we can start each day and end each day in grace, which all the things, love, acceptance, just
I
each
think it
day,
just
take it
embodies
one
it.
day at a time.
One day at a time.
Yeah, and we can show our children that that can be a way to flow through life despite what is happening in the outside world. I think that we would be a happier and healthier and probably more productive society in
I think
every
so
way.
too, because I think when we give ourselves grace, we give others grace, and then love just flows for everybody.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So before we go, would you be willing to share where people can find you on your website, social media, and your podcast I already mentioned?
Absolutely.
And then if you have anything up and coming that you want to invite anybody to check out.
Sure. I am at the Intuive Mother podcast, like we shared earlier. And my website is www.angieschaffer.com. And you can follow me at Instagram, which is at Angie Lynn Schaffer. You can tag these or whatever if you want in the comments. And what's up and coming is a 9-month program for moms to become their awoken mother. So the mother of their dreams, I feel like, comes through that awakening. And, it's not all just dreamy, motherhood, but to be an awoken mother and to walk through awakening, healing, and connecting to themselves, and then living that out in their motherhood and in their relationship with their daughters. So that's coming. I am still getting all of that up on the website, but it is coming in the next few months to start a program in the beginning of 2022.
Awesome. And I love that it's 9 months. It's like
birthing
your own
new seems like that was the best like that just made so much sense. I'm like, it takes 9 months to become a mom and have that baby in your arms. It takes 9 months to just come full circle with that and have the support to walk through it, because I feel like that has been such a big part of my own transformational journey, and my own time to step in as a mom was to have coaches and mentors and friends and everybody hold that sacred space as you walk through it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I 100% agree with you on that. Both you and I have been very active leading and also participating in many sisterhood circles, and it's really it's life-changing. And it's awesome to have that support and make new friends and have a coach or a mentor or a guide that has your back the whole way, willing to kind of call out your blind spots, but also hold that dream vision for you so that you can take blind action to get there.
Yeah. And I should share, because of course I was going to almost forget this, that I am going to restart a sacred motherhood circle, which is not necessarily going to focus as much just on the mother, but of offering support to the mother who's just in the thick of the teenage years, more so with their daughters. And I don't feel like we have that space. I feel like, you have little kids and we have play groups and the moms sit around and discuss all the ups and downs of what their kids are going through. And then we get to the teenage years and everybody's afraid to share, oh, my daughter's struggling with disordered eating, and my daughter's afraid, whatever it is, mental health, intimate relationships with their boyfriends or girlfriends. And I just feel like there's no space for that. And we're afraid to tell the mom in the pickup line. We're not even in the pickup line anymore. So we almost become isolated. So that is also going to relaunch. I've just had a couple of crazy weeks getting my own daughters back into the swing of school in person. So as soon as I get their things on my calendar, I will be starting that back up. And you'll find all the
That's
details on that
beautiful.
on Instagram.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to that. I totally agree. Like we have these moms groups when we're new moms, and then really the real struggle comes when they're
Yeah, like
teenagers because it gets
we're
super
worried
like we're
about like how many times they're going through a diaper in a
yeah,
day. And then
yeah,
it's like,
or
oh no, we got
food.
much bigger problems.
Yeah, it becomes real real
Real
quick, and
world.
it's
Hmm.
humbling, and I think
It
that's probably part of
is.
it is
It
like you really
is.
want to be in a space where you feel held and you trust, because it's very very vulnerable, because it probably brings
Hmm.
up your own stuff when you were that age.
Right, right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
find all the time when my daughters share something. I'm like, "Ooh, okay, this is bringing up this memory from my own teenage
yeah,
years."
like
So,
middle school,
yeah.
no
Oh, it
thank
was
you.
horrible. I don't
That
want to
was a
go
hard
back
time.
there.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was challenging for us.
yeah,
Well, thank
absolutely.
you so much,
Okay.
Angie. And yeah, we're gonna put some links in the show notes so people can find you and your offerings, which sounds so wonderful. Definitely a support group for moms and teenage daughters is super
Yeah.
awesome. Let me know because I'd love to share it on my Instagram.
Okay.
And yeah, thank you so much again for everybody joining in. If you have, any questions or any thing that you'd like to hear more about with parenting for Angie, please feel
Hmm.
free to reach out to her via
Yeah,
our show
absolutely.
notes.
All
Thank
right.
you
Thank you
so
so much for
much.
having me.
Of course. Have a good
Yep.
day.
You
Aloha.
too. All right.